I would now like to open the floor to nominations. Yes.
Joy Science nominate Gladys Yeo.
Any seconders?
Yes.
Any objection? No. Ms. Gladys, would you like to take up? Any other nominations? Seeing none, I would like to propose a closing of the nomination. Any seconders? Any objection? Ms. Gladys, may proceed. We have half an hour of presentation as well as half an hour of Q&A time subject to extensions.
So sorry for the technical difficulties. A brief introduction to myself. My name is Gladys. I'm the other year 2 that Wei Xiang was referring to. I'm from Life Science, and for today I'll be running for the Communication Secretary role. So just to share with you some of my past experiences, I was in the 15th Management Committee NUSSU Public Relations Unit, the 32nd Science Club Welfare Committee, NUSSU Bash 2012 Organising Committee, my own Raffles Hall Exposure Camp Organising Committee, and my own Science Faculty Club 2012 House Head. Now, all these experiences have actually contributed a lot to how I think right now and how I actually perceive the union itself or even NUS and fellow students to be. So if you allow me, I would like to share with you on how I actually see them. So this is how I see students. Imagine that they're Russian dolls. Each of us are unique in our own way. We have our own different appearances. But the most interesting thing is that Russian dolls are actually subsets of each other. If you've ever played Russian dolls, when you open the bigger one, there's a smaller one and a smaller one and a smaller one in it. And this analogy really highlights how I see the entire NUS population and us as students. That we are never part of just one entity, that we're actually subsets of various different entities. That while one side probably I'm a science student, another side I'm also part of a CSE subgroup. And that is how we are actually functioning as students, that we don't just belong to one entity, but we are subsets of each other. And in that sense, we're actually all interrelated. Another part about Russian dolls is that although we all may differ in sizes, although we may differ in appearances, what we are actually very, very similar, and that we actually have a common identity. Not just in what we have to do as students, but also in what our needs and concerns are. So this is basically what is our basic fundamental purpose here in NUS. It is to get a degree. No matter what faculty you're from, be it from engineering, computing, or even the arts, you are here to get a degree. So for the 3-4 years here, you're here to achieve a degree to go outside next time to work. And probably our aspirations would be to earn that $1 million before we're 30. Or probably just to make it up to the dean's list. But in this 3-4 years here, we know that that's not the only thing that we want to do. There are things that we want to explore, personal development. You probably want to dabble with the arts, win that first trophy, or even do something for the environment. As such, we often see a need for avenues in which we can explore ourselves and holistically. So we join these things to learn, experience, and to just have fun. But in these 3-4 years, while we bustle on for own activities and deciding what to do with these 3-4 years, there are certain things that actually matter to us. For instance, that tuition loan you have to pay off after your 4 years of education, that bus that never arrives on time for you to reach your lecture hall, things like even bidding for your modules and campus accommodation. And this is how I see the role of the Union Council. We are in essence channels. Channels not only for students, for them, for their needs and concerns, be it academic, holistic development, or even their welfare needs on a day-to-day basis, that we're actually channels, according to a chemist's term of a funnel, to bring a liquid into a bottle with precision. And that is how I see the union as. That with all these influxes of responses and concerns and all these feedback that's coming from students, we actually need a proper structure, a proper channel, such that these needs and concerns will be funneled to the correct places. But before we go about solving these things or meeting these needs of students, I find that there are a few questions which we really need to ask ourselves. Firstly is, how do we differentiate between needs and wants? For instance, the needs of students, what they want, is constantly evolving, is constantly changing according to time. I mean, back then, 20 years ago, the function of the union would have been different from now. Back then, 20 years ago, they had to settle more things of tangible welfare. or even things like financial things. Whereas right now, does the union still serve that purpose? And is the union still relevant in terms of what the needs of students are? Another thing is balancing of our resources. We are after all working with limited time, manpower, and most importantly, money. How do we cut the pie? Where should our proportions of our resources go to? And thirdly is, do we really understand and comprehend what students expect from us? What are their values, what are their concerns, and how they actually see the union in this? And the fourth question is, how do we communicate with each other and the student population? Now this question specifically highlights to me or pinpoints into what I want to achieve for this term. Now, how we intend to communicate with the student population might just hold the key to answering the previous three questions, because after all, we are a student organization here based on what students need and want. And this is how I see the way of tackling it. Science geek here. This is Nikola Tesla. He actually discovered alternating current. A little background information about alternating current. Alternating current is current that constantly moves back and forth. It's not just that it moves back and forth, but it has this unique ability to transform, to increase and decrease according to a certain need. Now, how I see this applicable to the union, it's because that it is not a certain specific fixed time whereby we get certain responses from students. And if we actually have communication channels to actually cater to all these changing needs. For instance, before the Kent Ridge MRT was established, there wasn't quite much an issue with the Kent Ridge MRT bus stop being overpacked. But eventually, during the opening, I guess all of us are aware that we have a lot of issues with traffic and even congestion. And that's the thing, we actually need these sort of channels to increase or decrease to meet to all these different changing environments. In essence, one-way communication is not relevant in such a situation, but rather a symmetrical two-way communication between us, the EXCO, conclubs, and with the student population. And this is the role of the communication secretary in that sense, and the communication cell. Firstly of all, by constitution, is to publicize activities of the union, be it directed by the union council or the executive committee. Now, publicizing of activities, back then it would be more of just letting students know of what is going on. The second is to disseminate information, also directed by the union council and the executive committee, in that sense of any decision made or any policy that has been done to be conveyed down to the student population. And the third thing is for union publications and ensuring that they actually reflect the aims and objectives. Now, union publications in this sense, for the constitution that was drafted back then, many years back ago, publications was the only mean of which students had interaction with their student organization, because back then the internet or even our social media was not present, and hence hard copy publications was the only mean of reaching out to students. Whereas in the case for now, it's not just union publications, but in all information that is disseminated out by the union should reflect their objectives. And this is what I want to accomplish for this coming term. Building relationships. I think this has been enforced a lot by my fellow elects. Building relationships. Improving communications, not in the terms of how we interact, but also our own infrastructure and operational level. And through these things, building relationships and improving communications, I believe that we can actually understand or better craft what the union should be or what role that the union should serve. And one of such things that I see the union should serve is also people development. Because we are, after all, students, we are not employed. And the benefit or how the union should be giving to us is not just in people development, in our own student leaders, but also our own volunteers, and also providing platforms for other student groups to explore. And these are the ways which I intend to do it. Now we have our channels. Channels meaning our communication channels in the current communication channels to reach out to the student population. We have our online digital media, from our website to Facebook, and even our regular email blasts. The social media, Facebook, our own publications, one of which is The Ridge, which is the official union publications, and others. Now I've put others here because I'm really interested in exploring other ventures. Our current channels right now, also under others, are the notice boards. But I feel that the notice boards in some way have become a bit redundant because of the nature of us right now, students, that rather than taking the time to look at notice boards have in some way or another lost their relevance and appeal to student groups. And others, coming under others, I would like to explore unconventional publicity. Unconventional publicity meaning things, for some of you who know, an example, Kai Kai and Jia Jia, if some of you have seen it, there was these big pandas that were walking around in the school compound. Unconventional publicities, even like flash mobs, low cost, high impact, that they bring about the message across even without the use of extensive materials. And this is one of the things I aim for our online digital media. Firstly is developing them, exploring what else they can do in terms of technical aspects, maintaining them in a sense for continuity, because building them up is not enough, that we have to ensure that we always have the technical expertise to continue such platforms. And diversifying. Now the student population is made up of several different groups, and each of us are inclined to a different kind of communication method. So in order for effective communication to all various different target groups, I believe in diversifying such that all of these groups are met. Now, these various groups can actually classify from the freshmen, undergraduates, and graduates. Now, some of our current initiatives that we actually have, or current publications or even channel modes that we have, for instance, the freshmen, we actually have the Mail Run, which is a pamphlet or brochure or a book that's actually placed into students' acceptance package when they actually are accepted into NUS. And that's one of the mediums that I see as a very effective platform for us to project ourselves as the union. Undergraduates, we currently have the email blast, the council digest that involves the various stakeholders of the council in terms of providing information for us to work together. And graduates, we actually have the commencement magazine, something that graduates can keep after they leave the school. And the one main thing that I would really like to look at is archival. Now, a lot of us see the importance in continuity, proper succession plans, that our plans are actually seen through. But continuity, in essence, is actually very people dependent. That I guess most of you have pointed out that in continuity is a lot depending on people, whether they are fatigued, whether they want to move on, whether they want to continue with this. And I see as hard copy archivals, even in our digital media, even our publications, as very good sources of information to give on to the next batch, such that even though if let's say our succession plans don't work, we can always ensure there's continuity in essence, that how information is passed down, and understanding how the previous has worked. Now, in terms of building relationships, there are a few things that I would like to focus on. Volunteers, EXCO, committees. This is more on the EXCO side, but there is a need for organizational culture and appreciation. Building relationships, again, continuity. It links back to how we can sustain the union in retaining talent. Our constituents, student groups, alumni, and the council itself. Now, alumni, they actually possess a benefit that if it's untapped can be gone. I'm sure a lot of our fellow faculty clubs here understand that alumni actually possess a wealth of information and even a wealth of assistance in whatever that we want to do, be it in terms of context or be it in terms of experience. Our various student groups. Now, some of you guys might perceive student societies and interest groups as separate from us, but I don't see it that way. That though under the constitution they might not fall under our jurisdiction, but they are after all students and hence part of the union. And that is something that I would like to explore in engaging them. Our constituents and the council. What I'll be really interested in is the building relationships between them. I strongly believe in opinion leaders, and that all of us here are opinion leaders in our own sense. And by building relationships with the council, I believe that such things can trigger down. And this is something that I'd like to touch on again is branding. Now, do not be mistaken that branding is about logos, it's about marketing, it's about taglines, it's about advertising. Branding is about what you want to say to people. It is in essence a symbolic representation of what your organization is. Now, how we relate to brands is very similar on how we relate to people. It's actually through impressions and experiences and even personal encounters with what this entity represents. A lot of you all have said things about One NUSSU, Louder NUSSU, and even Welfare NUSSU, and how branding comes in this sense is how we actually project this out to how we actually project this image to our external stakeholders. It is from the way we function in terms of how we interact with our own volunteers to how we react in the council and how we react to our fellow friends. Therefore, something that I'd like to explore is branding, not in logos and taglines, but in our own mentalities and how we see things. So this is something that I'd like to push forth. I'm sure most of you are familiar with this NUSSU candy bar. It's not just a candy bar. It is something that means more than that. It shows that you're actually part of a bigger entity, that we are a student organization here with a purpose. We are here to serve the students. We are here to be a representation to safeguard their interests and welfare and meeting their needs. And that is what this logo should be saying, not that it is written in a certain font, a certain color, but when people look at this logo, they understand what it actually holds and represents, and that is branding. That people understand what are the values and what our positions are, despite real or aspirational. Another thing is for students by students. Now I mentioned about personal development. Again, we are all students, and hence something that personal development I would like to do in my term is, under the communication cell, we have 3 committees: the public relations unit, the video and photographic committee, and the RICH. Now, something that these committees can do, I would feel, is to exploring and into developing their own niche areas of skills and talents. For instance, video and photographic committee into getting resources in developing their own skills. Likewise for the other 2 committees, and when they are able to actually acquire these sort of skills, these sort of set skills, we actually enable them to serve the operational function of the union. Now, what challenges are there that I think are in store? Firstly is changing mindsets. Changing mindsets come in 2 parts. Firstly, within ourselves. How our fellow council members see ourselves, how EXCO members see ourselves, how volunteers see us, and that is changing mindsets. And I see it as a very big challenge because mindsets are not cultivated overnight. Mindsets are there according to a framework of our previous expectations, and changing that poses actually a very, very big challenge. Another is external. A lot of my fellow friends here have pointed out things about apathy, how students view us, and that itself is a challenge also. Another thing which is a great challenge, I feel, is working with what we have. Now, my fellow elects have, I guess to most of you, have posted a lot of ideals, things that they want to achieve, big dreams, aspirations. But given our limited resources, given our limited constraints, it is understanding and accepting and managing expectations in what we want to achieve. Because though we may say that in this term I want to achieve this, and certain KPIs, we have to also manage the expectations that these things can't be met. And I wouldn't say managing failure, but managing small successes. So I've come to the end of my presentation. Thank you. And Q&As?
Any seconders?
No, Wilson.
Any objections? Q&A session will be half an hour long. Yeah. So, any questions on the floor right now?
Yes. Gladys, what if the students refuse to communicate with you?
Sorry, thank you for the question. This one is regards to apathetic students, correct? I guess many of us see apathetic students as a problem. We see that a lot of our events and initiatives, they go unappreciated or people don't respond because of this apathy that's present. But one of the things that I feel how apathy should be approached is this. Imagine you're a student. Imagine you're a very cynical and apathetic student. I'm perfectly happy the way I am. I see no relevance in what you're doing, therefore I choose to not take part in them. And I'm perfectly happy the way I am. But you seeing me as a problem, that my apathy is a problem. As a student, as a cynical student, I would say, you're the one with the problem thinking that I should be participating with you. And that's the kind of general mindset that we are working with. That apathy itself is not a problem, but rather that apathy itself is something that we should take into account of how we do things. That they should not be neglected in how we actually go about doing things. For instance, most of our projects or even events are more targeted or geared towards students who respond or the active population. But we have to be aware that there's also the latent or even those who don't respond. That in our allocation of resources and how we manage things shouldn't just be focused on doing activities that will eventually get a response from students or positive response for students, but that we should also focus on students who may not respond to us, and that is how I see it. Now, apathy students who are apathetic, there's always someone in their circle that influences them. That is how peer pressure works. That is how our social circles work. That though I might not see relevance in you, there's something that I'm part of, be it one or two friends, and they themselves are opinion leaders. And this is how I see that we should actually tackle things like that. While we engage in all the very festive and loud events, we should also place focus on the more passive kind of participation from the student population. For instance, case in point would be for these elections, it was not so much of union having dialogues with students or anything, but the mere thing of just posting our photos up, having our write-ups up there, I think all of us can admit that it has actually gathered quite a large reach. And this reach is due to this reach actually due to opinion leaders. And that is how I see we should tackle apathetic students. Another thing is, like I mentioned before, imagine I'm an apathetic student, I see no relevance in you, therefore I do not participate in your activities. That's something that we should start thinking about. That if this apathetic population, or who we deem as apathetic, is in fact the greater and majority population of the students, which is around 27,000, if they make up the majority, then I think we should really start looking at, are we still then doing what we need to do? Because we are here not just to do what we want to do, but we are here to do what needs to be done. So that's how I see it. Using multi-pronged approaches, not just focusing our efforts on a single channel, and also relooking at how we are still actually relevant. Yeah, thanks.
Hi, Gladys Yeo. I just want to ask, adding on to the apathy problem that we are all facing, right? How do you think that your capabilities or experience as a communication secretary will be able to help you to guide yourself into improving this problem of apathy of student participation?
Just to clarify, because I'm not the communication secretary yet, so I will base whatever experience.
If you were to be elected.
So whatever experience that I speak now of is based on my past experiences.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just say again how my past experiences will help me in guiding my current team. Is that the question?
Yeah.
Okay. I was part of the public relations unit when I was in year 1. I think Ren Kai actually brought up the perception survey. I was actually one of the 3 students who crafted all the questions for it. I wouldn't say it's a very significant experience, but it did give some insight to what the role of the communication secretary should be. That when we communicate with the student population, do we just send out a message, or should that message have a meaning? And should that message be crafted according to a specific target audience? And for instance, the apathetic students. Now, apathetic students are apathetic because they see no relevance in what we're doing, or in short, they see no interest in what you're doing. And by crafting messages and crafting certain things on how we speak to them, such that there's such a relevance, that they see such a relevance. For instance, I'm a student who doesn't participate in events. I'm a student who doesn't go ride and flag, I don't go to any of the other events, but the bus shuttle service is one big problem that I have because I can never get to lectures on time. And this is the one core problem that it's not just, it's a non-discriminative issue that every single student faces, and such that how we actually communicate with them tackles such core fundamental issues. So I would say that my experiences past have allowed me to understand how we can actually better communicate. Yeah.
Seen on sure, right, there's a lot of plans that you need to do. So what are the most important things that you need? Name 3.
Most important plans. I've actually listed improving communications, building relationships, and people development. So that in essence is already 3.
But encompassing all these 3 main ideas, there's a lot of nitty-gritty stuff.
Understand.
Yeah, so any focus?
Okay, my main focus I want to do, it depends on whether remaining status quo or progressing onwards from what we currently have. And since that the core competency of the communication cell would be to the management of our current communication channels, then the thing that I would like to focus on is actually developing and maintaining our current channels. Not in the sense of content, but in the sense of operational and technical. Because we always have this problem, some wonder genius from beforehand builds up an awesome website. But in the next coming batch, no one knows how to maintain it. And when the server crashes, no one knows how to go about handling it. And that's the first thing that I want to look into, is actually training ourselves with the relevant skills such that these improvements made over time can actually be maintained. So the main thing that I'd like to do is to actually maintain and develop our current communication channels in a technical aspect. Yeah.
Wilson asks 2 questions. First question, how do you see the con clubs fit into the whole picture of communications in the union? Where do they fit in?
Do you mean on the council level, or do you mean on MCs and all? How I see it is that con clubs or faculties, it doesn't mean that I'm from a certain group, that certain information should be exclusive to me, or certain information should not be released to me. And that is how I see them coming to the picture, that whatever information that is given out or publicized to the entire student population is not discriminative in how it outreaches to students, that everyone has access to such forms of information. For instance, in terms of mutual benefits, on how the EXCO/committees can benefit con clubs, certain information can actually benefit. For instance, I can tell you that right now the Video and Photographic Committee, the NUSSU Video and Photographic Committee, has actually established workshops for their members to develop photographic skills. This sort of information, I think, possesses a lot of potential. For instance, con clubs have difficulties in doing their own media aspects. And me providing this sort of information to you can give you the opportunity for you to develop and utilize such platforms for your own benefits. So that is how I see it. It's not so much of what I'm doing is going to be a direct impact, but more of what has already been present and me telling you that for you to utilize such resources is the benefit, is this flow of information. Yeah.
Second question.
Oh.
Just a very short question. The communications plan that was presented is very comprehensive. Do you have one single word that will describe your whole package? Like the best word to describe your goal and your drive, like for this term?
Bringing the union closer to you. I'm sorry, I don't have a word. It's a sentence. Bring the union closer to you. I know some of us would probably say bring us closer to the union, but I see the union ourselves should be the driving force of whatever needs to be done, and the communication cell comes in that role. So bring the union closer to you. Yeah.
Service computing. Can I ask, how do you plan to work with the welfare cells or any other cells in general, especially in the EXCO?
Okay, in terms of the communication cell, from what I know from the previous batches with regards to welfare, right, there are 2 things that will really matter. Firstly is their own tangible or active welfare, and the more passive policy-making welfare. The difficulties that they have faced so far, or to my own knowledge, is in terms of tangible welfare is letting students know about it. If I'm not wrong, last year they had the Eat Plants Love. I'm sorry, I hope I got that correct. But there was actually a series of initiatives. For instance, the free ice cream welfare pack giveaway, but there was actually more. For instance, in catering to wellness, they had things like even yoga lessons. And as a student myself, not as a communication, but as a student myself, I felt that the messaging or even the efforts into publicizing this event was not sufficient for me to know what was going on. Now, I knew about the Eat Cone Day because I was in a lecture hall and someone else was eating it. Sorry. So, and that's the kind of thing that although we may be rolling out all these great initiatives to benefit the student population, if we don't tell students about it, or we don't plan a proper campaign to tell students about it for message retention, then a lot of our efforts are futile because we may be doing so much, but if people don't know about it or people are unaware about it, then that's a difficulty that we'll have. So how the communication style I see in this is not just our more conventional methods in terms of our publicity channels, but I said something about unconventional publicity. Now, I'm the kind who goes around school thinking about stupid things to do. So imagining a flash mob regarding welfare pack. Imagine a group of students running out with exam welfare packs and dancing. I think that benefits everyone, that such a hype that's generated, even from a low cost but high impact event, can benefit all our con clubs in doing what they're doing. In terms of the passive welfare, which is policy making, now a lot of policy making things are actually ongoing. What information that I've been receiving from is, for instance, the email blast. We actually have sort of updates like, oh, what's going on in the council, what is going on with this, and that is something which I would like to further explore, that to not only make it such an ad hoc basis, but on a more regular term, in a more appealing way of portraying them. As you can see, I'm quite a big fan of infographics. I'm not a fan of words, chunks of words. I like icons, I like images, I like simplistic design, and I think that it itself has some appeal to students in communicating with them. Now, I mean, when you open the email blast, you see these chunks of messages, I can't be bothered with it. But when you actually see something that gets your attention, be it whether you know what's relevant to you or not, you still want to look at it. And that's the thing I want to look at, that while we're doing all these policy changes, that students are able to find out about it, not just plain information, but in a more interactive and effective communication method. Yeah.
Joshua, CAC. I was wondering if you have any KPIs or how you're going to measure your success throughout if you are related.
KPIs, I'll split it into operational and conceptual. Okay, operational wise, I'll be measuring in statistics, because in operations it's all about the hard figures and data. Operational wise, I do understand that various con clubs, when they do submit their email blast requests, there's always this backlog in terms of what needs to be sent out. And operationally, that's something that I would like to improve. Formative research beforehand first, understanding what the problems that all these con clubs or different stakeholders face, and working on them. That's one of the KPIs. And whether after the change, in evaluating if they have actually improved. There's also this two-way communication that we have in evaluating. So for instance, the first pre-revamp survey would go, do you find it efficient? Probably 20% say yes. And after the revamp, it's an evaluation again, do you find it efficient? If there's an increase to even 50% or 60%, that is a success itself. So operationally, that is how I will measure it. In terms of responses, before and after event. Conceptual wise, now I talk a lot about building relationships. You can't actually, it's difficult to measure how much you have built relationships. It is equivalent to saying something, how do you measure awareness? Because it's something so intangible that you cannot actually pinpoint and put a ruler to it. So here is how I see it. Whatever things that we're pushing out is actually information. And all this information actually hopes to change your knowledge. And from that knowledge translates to a change in mindset. And from that mindset, a change in behavior. So in essence, I'll be measuring behavior outcomes rather than how much you know. Because while I may be telling you this, if you don't act on it, if you do not have a change in the way you behave, then whatever thing I've done before probably might not be that effective and I can't access it. So how I measure it is, for instance, behavioral. I'll give an example. For instance, according to a perception survey, we actually are able to ask what are the students' impression of the union. And with that, we can actually plan what kind of campaigns or awareness campaigns we want to push out, be it through on the EXCO level or most importantly on the CONCUP level. I think Ren Kai mentioned about the town hall thing, and that itself is actually a measurement of behavior, not a measure of awareness. It is more of what you really know and how you respond to it, and I'll measure that sort of behavior outcomes. So that is how I measure the two, operational and conceptual. Yeah, thanks.
Can I do a follow-up?
Yeah.
Like how are you gonna increase like the number of perception surveys, like response, like if it's possible?
Okay, a little background about the perception survey in the previous term. It was released around before the exam period. If I'm not wrong, it was the first perception survey that was done. There was a bit of monetary incentive. If I'm not wrong, the first 60 would actually get a $10 co-op voucher, as in the first 60 response. So, as realistic as it sounds, monetary incentives is what appeals to people. But aside from that, I think it also comes from how we brand ourselves. Now, branding again is not logos or taglines. Branding is about how we portray ourselves and what values that we show. If the union itself can show that we are a student population that is representative of the student voices, then in essence, getting students to respond through our channels is by building this relationship first, that students understand that we are actually here for them. So I'm sorry I cannot give a direct answer because it is also something that is intangible and is more of a measurement of behavior rather than saying they're forcing people to do things. Yeah.
Degree engineering. Okay, I got 3 questions, hope you don't mind. The first question is, you mentioned a lot about building relationships in your presentation. So parking alumni internal relations portfolio under presidential cell or any other cells versus communication cells, which one do you think is more effective for the union and the students in achieving our objectives?
Internal alumni parked under presidential
other
cell
cells versus
rather the communication cell. I see plus and minus points. The plus point in that sense, according to the structure that is currently right now, it's not just that it is under presidential cell, but it is actually under the Hongen. So I'm sorry, can anyone clarify whether it is parked under the presidential cell or whether it is parked under the Hongen in that aspect? Because the diagram...
Just now Wilson mentioned under his presentation, he mentioned that Hongen will be in charge of his proposed presidential cell.
So literally parked under the presidential cell
based
then?
on his proposal.
Okay, I'll just base it on them then. Okay, presidential cell, how I perceive it is, it's actually a group that each of the 5 cells in the union fulfill a certain core function. The presidential cell is actually appealing to something called students' interest, hence NVAC, RRC and SAFE, and the various FOCCs, so it's students' interest. I would prefer it if it were more parked under Hongen because I would see more relevance in that sense, because the press cell in that is actually operationally in serving students' interests. Whereas if let's say we're under the Hongen is supposed to be a direct the direct point of information contact between our various stakeholders, including our CONCUPs. That very form of administrative operational side is already a very good place for building of internal relationships. But a minus point I see from there is that the communication cell is really building, we are actually focused a lot of undergraduates and freshmen, and even the graduates in terms of the publications that we push out, that placing them under 2 heads might not serve a common purpose, because after all we're dealing with two two different perspectives of how relations should be approached. So I do see plus and minus points. Plus points is that the administration there is really present and how we actually utilize that channels. Minus point in how we actually have a unified effort in building relationships with our stakeholders. Yeah.
Thanks. My second question would be this. Can I assume that, based on your presentation, that you are agreeable with the President and Vice President's vision of a louder union? This is the first part.
Okay.
It's just a
sorry.
yes or no. Do you agree?
But if it's okay if I explain?
It's an add-on. It's a follow-up question. There are two parts to it.
It's a yes and a no. It depends on how I define a louder union to myself or even to myself.
Okay, then let me follow up with my second part.
Okay.
Okay, the thing is, for the union, right, we have a lot of events or initiatives that we collaborate with other external parties, for example, like school officers or external commercial parties that actually bring greater benefit for our students. However, a lot of times we do not actually focus a lot on naming of these events to be more union-centric. So do you think is it important for the union to be focusing on like the naming of the events, even though it may not be that important as long as we bring benefits to students?
With regards to naming, I mentioned that NUSSU itself is not just a name. It's not just a design or a tagline. That the union represents for students by students. And yes, I understand the renaming of events and such. Although we closely work with student officers, it is how these initiatives are portrayed by students. For instance, that we want to push out a louder union or louder NUSSU. If such nitty-gritty things, for instance, how we even brand ourselves, how we even brand our own student initiatives, our own students who are driving across all these things that bring credits or benefits to students, then how are we then being a louder union, or how are we even then being one NUSSU? Because these are the things that matter. That us as a student organization, that we are not paid to do what we're doing. Sometimes we're underappreciated. But this name itself represents a lot. It's not just something to be placed there and can be replaced once in a while, because it actually is very representative of our own student efforts as a student organization. So if this is to the louder NUSSU, then in that sense, I do agree with a louder NUSSU, but in terms of how we go about doing it, we should really think on it. Because although we might have these big ideas, but when it comes down to the small issues and we don't look at it in the same manner, then I think there's a discrepancy in how things will turn out. Because it's about having a consistent image. Yeah. Consistent and unified image. Yeah.
Okay, then my last question. So how would you deal with volunteers or some of the students who feel that branding or naming or even union branding is not important?
Students do you mean general student population, or do you mean our own stakeholders?
I'll try to be more specific. Our own stakeholders, our volunteers. How do you intend to change their mindset?
I think changing mindset itself is a very difficult task to do. In terms of our own stakeholders, it will be more of a term of persuasion, I would say, on the importance of branding. Now, one of the importances I see in branding is credibility of the institution. I'll try and give an example that is more relatable. For instance, a lot of us have marketing efforts into reaching out to sponsors for our own events, to help our own events. And if sponsors as external stakeholders or external bodies are able to see that we are actually part of a greater entity, for instance, in a marketing pitch, it actually benefits everyone to a large extent, because this branding is actually a form of reputation, and this branding is actually a form of credibility, and hence will benefit us in that sense. So persuasion for the current people who do not share the same mindset or who do not believe in branding. In terms of looking forward, I'm actually very interested in people development. For instance, currently right now the public relations unit, I'm actually looking into development of training of PR skills. Now PR is not just knowing how to talk to people. Public relations is about image, it's about our reputation, it's about how we conduct ourselves. And I think Ita mentioned something about crisis management, and that's the first thing that I'd like to look at. It's actually training a team, not just forming one, but training a team to be functionally, operationally able to tackle these situations. And one of them of training people would be how we go about planting the seeds in changing mindsets. Sorry, yeah.
David from Medicine. Not sure if I've asked, you've mentioned this already just now, but I would like to know about communication and publication of information. Which medium do you think is the most effective and would be your priority for the coming year, be it Facebook, Twitter, magazines, or emails? Yeah. Which will be your priority and why?
Publications, I assume, is hard copy publications.
No, I mean like in terms of any form of dissemination of information. Yeah.
Which should be my priority. If I were to break it down to student groups, I will break it to, if I really have to make a decision, because I really don't see how there should be a priority, because all of them are of equal importance. So if, let's say, really time and resources, I think it will be groups in terms of the freshmen and undergraduates. In terms of the graduates, in our communication channels, I think based on the fact that subscription fees, that they are part of the union, hence make them a priority, freshmen and undergraduates. So what I'd like to focus on is then, I'm sorry, did I answer your question?
I think you misread my question. My question is, which do you think is the most effective means of reaching out to the students? Yeah.
Okay, sorry, I didn't answer you correctly then. I would say our online digital media, the main thing is our website. We actually have the website, email blast, and Facebook. So in terms of online, I feel that they're the most effective. Not so much because they reach out to a greater population, but operationally they're the easiest to handle. Not technical expertise wise also. But for instance, publications, you print out something, whether it's wrong, whether it's right, you can't change it because it's been printed out. And that is a constraint itself. Whereas if we were to focus more on online mediums, we actually are working with something that's very versatile and very adaptable to whatever changes that we need to do. So in terms of effective, it will be in this case for our side, in terms of how we operate. Effective also in reaching out to students, because a lot of us are part of the online community, be it how we use the net in our websites and Facebook. So the online presence, I would feel, would be my main focus for effective communication.
Can I clarify that online you mean by social media, Facebook, and not so much as website? Or
Our website is the main. Our Facebook and all these are in some sense supporting channels. Yeah, because there's only so much that social media can contain. For instance, with Facebook timeline, one post and everything goes up, or goes down, sorry. So in that sense, we have a constraint in how information appeals to students. So the website is the main, and the other
Most clubs have a publicity cell or communication cell of their own. So I would like to ask, what is your view on the role of these cells in assisting the union push branding?
Firstly is that the various comm clubs have actually different ways of structuring themselves. For, let's say, computing, they have a certain publicity cell, whereas from science, because I'm from science, they actually have a different way of structuring it. So firstly, in order I see how they actually come into play, is understanding first how all these structures work, because various comm clubs have different ways of functioning and different ways that work for them. So firstly is to doing research about how they work in the first place. How they come into play into promoting the union presence. I can give an example. IFG again. Very sorry. We publicized the IFG on our own Facebook according to the timeline. And what I noticed was quite interesting is faculty clubs, or some faculty clubs that I visited their websites, they actually they shared this photo for their own students. Now, it is not in the sense that whereby I'm promoting a branding, but I'm promoting these benefits that my own students can share also. It's also information dissemination. I'm not saying that whereby our own publicity, whereby Con Club's publicity channel should be going all out for very union-centric things, but in accomplishing our own functionalities in that way, we're actually also pushing out the branding of the union. And that's the perception that I actually aim to change, that whatever you're doing for the students as a Con Club, we are actually doing it for the union, and that they are not two distinct entities, that they are all together, because our students in the Con Clubs are also part of the union. So change it in how we view it lah. Yeah.
There's time for one more question.
How do you intend to utilize your Park Standing Committee in fulfilling the objectives? Do you need any more information?
No, I'm thinking, sorry. Okay.
Information. Park Standing Committee is a standing committee that is elected from among the council reps, to be chaired by the communications secretary, to spearhead any park initiatives across the union.
Okay, in terms of the standing committee, I wouldn't say assigning them a certain role, for instance, a creative director, someone who has to design, because the standing committee comes from the council, and I understand that each council rep has their own portfolio to fulfill in their own constituent club. And by actually assigning certain tasks can actually distract one, or not say distract, but make one incapable of fulfilling both portfolios, be it to your own Con Club or to the standing committee expectations. So in terms of what I expect from the standing committee, it's not so much about role specific, but in terms of what perspectives they can give me. Council reps, because that from the standing committee, are each from our own faculty, and how we actually know how our own faculty operates. And that itself is a way in which I can get information and research about how things function. So it's perspectives, gathering comments and even feedback, and evaluating how our current initiatives are working. Because in the cell itself, I guess in all 5 cells, we operate in a certain way. And sometimes how we perceive things as successful or not is a bit self-serving, that we think, oh, we did it, so it means it's very good. By having a standing committee, I see them as this devil's advocate. Sorry if I didn't use the term right. But in terms of critiquing or even analysing whether our current initiatives have been effective. So I would like to use the standing committee as a point of evaluation for my initiatives. Yeah.
If the time for Q&A has lapsed, is there any motion to extend? Yes.
Win CSC extend for 5 minutes. Yeah.
Any seconders?
CSC.
Any objections? Seeing none, the motion is passed. So there will be 5 more minutes of Q&A.
Okay, so as you know, no faculty.
Sorry, who are you?
Oh, I think CSC. So as you know, faculty clubs, actually we need a lot of publicity for our events. So as we target all the NUS population instead of like one faculty. So is there any concrete plans that you have that you can help us in our publicity and in our recruitments?
In terms of publicity, I'll look at it as the online and even your publications. If I'm not wrong, is CSC correct? If CSC correct, you guys have the Love Tuner, which is publications that actually compiles all your initiatives and events. Okay, 2 ways how I can see it. In terms of online, like I said, that we're actually all very diverse groups, and we actually are part of very different social circles. Now, CSC, although it is to the entire student population, there's actually some people who fall through the loop in our perspective, that though we may be blasting it out to everyone, there are those who do not capture such information. And how I see the current, the Facebook or Union Facebook as a complementing method. For instance, I've actually seen CSC recruitment posted onto the Facebook, and that itself is a way of complementing each other and having this mutual benefit and helping each other. Because while you have your own target audience and you try to reach out to them, we also have another group of target audiences, and if we can actually share that groups, I think it's beneficial on both sides, because there are certain groups that you have to target that are in our group. So that's how I see it in widening our own scopes of engagement. In terms of publication side, I am not too aware of how distribution goes about. Is it okay if you can clarify? Because Love Tuner, I'm not too sure, is it an internal distributed or is it distributed to all students?
For enough information,
Yeah.
that's the question.
Yeah.
For Love Tuner, we publish it and we give out to any volunteers who want it, any people who are interested in our talk. Yeah.
So in essence, it's actually internally distributed.
Mostly outreach or outreach event. We have an outreach event where we have sent out email and tell the NUS population that we have this outreach event, so they're invited to come for this outreach, and this is the time that we can give out to them. Yeah. And sorry, to add on top of that, we also use Love Tuner as a publicity tool to our potential sponsors or our existing sponsors.
This is something then I guess there's a the thing that we have in common. You guys have the Love Tuner. In terms of the Exco site, we actually have something called the About You publication. While I cannot say that I'll be able to promise to help in distribution side, but how I can see is it's a mutual benefit of, again, perspectives. For instance, if I'm not wrong, the Love Tuner is actually an A4 size booklet, correct? For the About You book, it's actually an A5 book, and the contents are actually very different in terms of how it's presented and the layout. And we also use it for not only to be given out as appreciation. For instance, when external bodies visit, we give it out as a form of information, but we also use it, we intend to use it as a corporate book in terms of pitching for sponsors. Then if that is the case, I think there's a potential for us to share information about how which method is more effective in terms of content, in terms of how we actually portray what entity we are part of. So I see in that way. For the online, it's sharing our database, and for publications, in sharing information on how to improve ourselves. Yeah.
Any more questions? Yes.
Can I propose a closing?
Any seconders? Any objections? Seeing none, yeah, the Q&A session is over. Let's put our hands together for Ms. Gladys Yeo.
One. One. 1. 1. Last one. Thirty-one, 4, 1, void. So pass. Can I return Gladys as the concept